Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Genre Benders, Obscurities, and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. It's October, the month of Halloween. On the one hand, that means you'll be seeing a lot of monsters such as werewolves, and on the other hand, that means you'll be hearing a lot of spooky music when you go into the stores. Put the two of them together, and you get Powerwolf. For those who don't know, Powerwolf is one of the many power metal bands to rise in prominence over the last few years. Well, perhaps that's underselling it. Of those many bands, Powerwolf has really taken off in popularity, probably because it is unique. Most power metal bands these days usually write music around some sort of central premise, and the most common premise is the genre of sword and sorcery fantasy, inspired by Dungeons & Dragons, Middle-earth, Norse mythology, and Conan the Barbarian. Many bands even turn that premise into an identity, creating entire worlds the songs are set in and using theatrical elements like costumes and live performances to make each concert a full stage show. Powerwolf is one of those total concept bands, but they went in a different direction from fantasy. The founders of this band were not interested in wizards and dragons. They were interested in gothic horror, European folklore, Catholic rituals, and of course, werewolves.
Werewolves.
By putting it all together, they came up with a premise that stands out from the pack. In the world of Powerwolf, the Catholic Church is secretly run by a cabal of werewolves who have been sent from heaven to slay demons, vampires, and heretics, which they do loyally even though mankind persecutes them as monsters. Certainly an unusual premise, and the music follows suit. While the melodies have the same intensity and uplifting effect as power metal, the infusion of gothic elements and keyboards programmed to sound like pipe organs leads to a different sort of sound, something that is a bit darker and heavier on atmosphere without compromising the bombast. And of course, the stage shows runneth over with theatrical elements and pyrotechnics. In short, the band took a chance, and it has paid off big time. Something I need to make clear, though, is that even though Powerwolf is dripping with Catholic imagery, it should not be mistaken for a Christian band. Despite all the hallelujahs and crucifixes, they have quite a few songs that are critical of the Catholic Church as an organization, as well as songs that would never fly in a church talent show. Some of you might also be wondering about the makeup they wear. Well, that's a style known as corpse paint, which is commonly implemented in black metal, a genre that is openly satanic and uses occult symbols and imagery in their shows. Powerwolf can in that case be seen as a satirical inversion of that genre, given that it goes in the direction of being pro-God instead of anti-God, but I repeat, it is not a Christian band. Well, Powerwolf might not be Christian, but we are, so I'm sure people are wondering how we rationalize listening to them. Oh, that's easy. I think the band's collective philosophy is best demonstrated in the music video for My Will Be Done, in which we follow a kingly figure who is presented with various things to amuse him, none of which work until he is presented with the power of music. And from there, that's all he cares about. Indeed, the band members themselves have frequently said that their priority is not to spread any kind of message, but rather to just entertain. In that light, you could say Powerwolf is sort of like the metal equivalent of Hammer horror movies, which also use gothic atmosphere, religious imagery, and ancient folklore for the purposes of entertainment. I watch those movies for escapism, not for sermons. For those, I go to church. And lastly, I'm Protestant, not Catholic, so their critiques of Catholicism don't really affect me at all. Now, I could review each of their albums individually, or I could zero in on their concept album Lupus Dei, or I could look through the different imagery in their music videos, but instead, I'm gonna zero in on a unique event. You may recall that back in 2020, the world shut down, and it remained shut down well into 2021. In hindsight, this was a huge mistake, but that's a commentary for another time. During this lockdown, nobody could go anywhere or do anything. As the world slowly started to open back up, certain events were still discouraged, live concerts among them. In order to stay afloat, many bands took to the internet and did the best they could to play over Zoom, but in typical fashion, Powerwolf would do something a little bit different. The result is a cinematic experience known as the Monumental Mass. This film does have a very, very loose plot, or should I say framing device. In a monastery somewhere in Europe, a young monk is given a book he is expected to read. This ancient tome is emblazoned with the Powerwolf logo, and within its pages he finds strange secrets and philosophies. As he reads, the general idea of each chapter is expressed by Powerwolf songs. There are 4 chapters specifically entitled Temptation, Sin, Confession, and Forgiveness, in that order, and the songs theoretically align with those concepts. The Monumental Mass is designed to emulate what it's like to see a live Powerwolf performance without actually being a live performance. And because it's on a soundstage, the advantage was taken to do some stuff they otherwise have never been able to do before, especially when it came to special effects and pyrotechnics. Fire and the use thereof is a common sight at a lot of rock concerts and metal concerts as well, but there are always limits to what you can do with it on stage. As there should be. Fire looks neat, but even in the most controlled conditions it's unpredictable. The bigger the effect, the bigger the risk, and if something goes wrong during a show, people could get seriously hurt. Exactly. But when you're on a soundstage where a fire crew can be right off camera and you can stop the show if something goes wrong, there's a bit more freedom to responsibly experiment. Really, that's one of the primary reasons this movie exists. It was an excuse for the band to do stuff that no live venue would ever sign off on. I can just imagine that in every scene there are people standing poised and ready with hoses and fire extinguishers just in case something goes wrong. As far as I can tell, no accidents occurred, and the results we see on screen are insane. Consider the flaming wings on these 2 models during Venom of Venus. Admittedly, all the 2 of them do is stand there. They aren't able to do much else because the wings are both heavy and on fire. Still, they don't really need to do much more because the fire is doing the heavy lifting here. Most memorable of all, though, is the flamethrower pipe organ featured during Fire and Forgive. Something the band has probably wanted to use for years. Despite the standard-sized keyboard it's attached to, we get treated to massive pipes just bursting with fiery jets throughout the song. Looking at the footage, I don't think the fire is actually timed to the beat of the music, but whatever, it still looks cool. It's not just the fire that's impressive, though. The band also performs on specially designed stages in front of massive screens, both of which work together to give each song a visual setting. These include the interiors of cathedrals, the exteriors of old dark mansions, vast fields scattered with forgotten ruins, and the inside of the Nostromo from Alien? And that thing looks like a Stargate of some sort. I don't know, maybe those are in the basement. Either way, it's visually interesting. You can't deny that. But here's the real question. Is the Monumental Mass actually about anything, or is it all just spectacle? Well, you might be surprised at the answer. Before we get to that, though, let me clarify something. There's a perspective among us Christians that all of creation reflects the image of God. Since this is a fallen world, of course, that reflection can be warped and cracked, but it is still a reflection. Now, Powerwolf is not a Christian band, as mentioned, and I highly doubt they set out to convey a Christian message, but if you look at it the right way, the Monumental Mass actually does convey something along those lines. As mentioned, the movie is split into 4 chapters entitled Temptation, Sin, Confession, and Forgiveness, respectively. Now, if you listen to the specific lyrics, they don't necessarily reflect those ideas exactly, but the progression does follow a particular order. In the first 2 chapters, the ideas and imagery grow steadily darker, as the overarching idea is about drifting further away from the light of God. By the halfway point, we are about as far as we can get, completely fallen and enslaved by evil. But once the Sin chapter ends, things start to get lighter. Note how the Confession chapter features frontman Attila Dorn dressed as Jesus during Beast of Gévaudan. This is in reference to the music video for that same song, in which Dorn reenacts the March to Calvary if it took place on the set of The Wolfman. What does the crucifixion of Christ have to do with an 18th century cryptid attack in the French countryside? You know, that is a good question. Yes, it is. Do you have an answer? Well, my theory is that the song equates the beast to sort of a savior figure come to purify France, and since werewolves are divine in the Powerwolf setting, he is equated to being a Christ-like figure. That's as far as I can figure anyway. Now, you could call the costume and equivocation a bit blasphemous, but the placement of the song within the movie is what stands out to me. It is after things have gotten as dark as they can that the image of Christ appears, and Christ is, of course, the one who redeems sin. The same chapter ends with Where the Wild Wolves Have Gone, a ballad in which a pack of werewolves mourn their dead, but they also remember a promise that they will be reunited in paradise. This is the last song in that chapter, closing it on a bittersweet yet still hopeful tone. Following this, the final chapter, Forgiveness, brings us back into the light of God, not only redeemed, but better than before. Of course, in the lyrics, being better means becoming a holy werewolf crusading against the undead, but the allegory still applies. So in a roundabout and certainly unconventional way, the concert conveys the core idea of Christianity, that no matter how far you've fallen, no matter how debaucherous and vile you may have become, you are not beyond redemption. Nobody is. As said though, this movie is not a substitute for reading the Bible or attending church. It is an imperfect reflection, after all. Still, for it to convey these ideas even with the crazy horror movie premise is surprising. So in the end, the Monumental Mass is a feast for the eyes with just enough substance to make it interesting. And it makes for a great viewing experience during spooky season. If you can get it before the wolves get you, that is. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Say, this premise of holy werewolf sounds an awful lot like what you wrote in Occult Mafia and Emerald of Maddox City. Was that intentional? Actually, no. I came up with the idea that would become Occult Mafia long before Powerwolf even existed as a band, and both the band and myself were inspired by the same pre-existing folklore. You know what they say, great minds think alike. I agree. Do you know any? Well, there's this one... Ha ha ha, you're hilarious.